And then our next speakers will be Maria-Kristiina Lotman and Rebekka Lotman, who are going to speak to us about driving strategies in Estonian rap lyrics statistical view. Please.
Thank you. So the aim of our paper, as you can see, is to study the rhyming models of Estonian rap poetry on the background of different rhyme canons established in Estonian literary poetry. And our study relies on the statistical analysis of different rhyme types in these canons, and we have chosen some exemplary authors for this analysis. First, from the early period of Estonian poetry, Karl-Eduard Sööt, then a modernist author, Henrik Visnapuu, then his younger contemporary, Teiti Alver, then the most important author, underground author after World War II, Artur Allikson, and then two rap poets, Metsakuitsu and Genka. Ever since the beginnings of rhyme discussions in Estonia, rhyme has been considered a problem. And difficulties with it arise already because of multiple objective linguistic causes. And first, as you can see, the first problem is the abundance of vowels, and especially the abundance of diphthongs. For instance, here is a table from the work of Ilse Legiste, who has given us some, but it is not comprehensive because Tiit Rein-Viitso has added to the original 25 diphthongs 11 more diphthongs which are found in loan words. So there are many diphthongs, and this makes the occurrence of full rhyme pairs already statistically less likely. So, in addition to that, we have 3 degrees of duration, short syllables, long syllables, and overlong syllables. And since rhyme partners of different durations are not advisable in heuristic approach, this is another difficulty. But of course, poets do use such rhyme pairs, as you can see from this example here. Homme ootab sõjapõrgu, aga mees ei kohku tõrgu. So põrgu is overlong, and tõrgu is of the second duration. So morphological structure of Estonian language constitutes another source of difficulty. And although it is sometimes claimed that the Estonian case system presents an advantage in creating inflectional rhymes, it nevertheless doesn't work so in practice, since such phenomena like consonant gradation or suffix gradation result into a large variation of possible endings. And there are also difficulties pertaining to vocabulary, because our rhyming repertoire has had a limited time to develop, since Estonian literary culture is quite young. And as a matter of fact, we see in these thematic areas which are more advanced, like nature poetry, a larger rhyme repertoire too. So, for this reason, the definition of rhyme has been a matter of dispute in theoretical writings ever since the 17th century. And in the first Estonian poetics, which was written in the 19th century by Jan Bergman, the only proper rhyme was considered to be a full, perfect rhyme, and all the other types of rhymes were seen as an incorrect one. But in the actual poetry practice, the scope of allowed rhymes has always been wider, and different types of mere rhymes have been admitted. And for our analysis, we have distinguished, in addition to this full rhyme, the first group here, like naked, gated, where the only difference lies in the onset of the stressed syllables. We have distinguished 6 types of mere rhymes. And first, the rhymes where we can see the difference in the vowel of the stressed syllable, laheneb, läheneb. Then the vowel of the non-initial syllable, ikka, ikke. The syllable length, the difference in syllable length consonants, like king, pilt, and there can be also differences in durations, like ta, ma. Then we have met so-called semi-rhyme, where one of the rhyming words has an additional syllable, like vist, vistna, and identical rhyme, head, head. And in addition, we have encountered 2 other types, just a few authors, like author rhymes, verses without rhyme partner, otherwise in a rhyme context, and identical follow rhymes where the entire verse line is repeated. So let's take a look at the data. First, this early author from the 19th century, and you can see that he strongly prefers full rhyme, but he also sometimes allows some types of mere rhyme, where you can see differences in durations, different vowels and stressed syllables, and identical follow rhymes. But when we move on to the modernist rhyme, then here we can see actually a diversity of approaches. There are authors who actually continue the traditional rhyming patterns. Then there is a new rhyme where the authors prefer near rhymes, and then puristic rhymes. And when we take a look at the statistics, then here is the data from Maria-Kristiina Lotman, one of the most important modernist poets, Lotman's poems, and you can see that although full rhyme is preferred more than 72% of the times, there are quite a lot of different rhyme types, which all different near rhyme types. The most frequent one is difference in syllable length consonants. Now, let's move on to the next poet. This is an example of a completely puristic tradition which started to develop in the versification of some members in the literary group named arvujad, which means the sorcerers. And they developed a rhyming technique that consists in completely pure and almost universally full rhymes. And here you can see that, for instance, Peeti Alver, at least in our sample, has almost 100% fully rhymed verses. And there are just a few exceptions where there is a difference in durations, or I think it was one example with different vowels in these syllables. So, after the loss of Estonia's independence, socialist realism became the official literary doctrine, and experimental trends disappeared from poetry. And this concerned as well versification, and experimentation with different rhyme types disappeared as well. Full rhyme became predominant in the published poetry. But at the same time, the so-called underground poetry started to develop, and here you can see the data from the most notable poet at the time, and again here full rhyme, the proportion of full rhyme has diminished, and you can see that different types of near rhymes are present again. So he diverges from the official canons here. These are the basic rhyme standards of Estonian literary poetry. But they are not isolated from each other. They are always in dialogue. They are counter-reactive. They argue with each other about the rhyme. But now let's move on with the rap poetry. Yes. While already in the middle of the 20th century, the idea began to spread that Estonian rhyme have been exhausted. Then there is a genuine turn occurring now in popular culture. Along with modern music platforms, at first YouTube, then most notably SoundCloud, rap is increasingly gaining popularity among youth. And we can say that this musical genre had already been present in the alternative scene since the beginning of 1990s. It has now become mainstream. As with the rap cultures of other languages, the main device of instrumentation of Estonian rap is rhyme. Under the influence of Western rap artists in this century, Estonian rap poetry started to discover new rhyming possibilities and to introduce them to the Estonian language. And for this paper, we have analyzed it using the example of two artists. The following chart gives an overview of the rhyme types in the text by hip-hop artist Genka, who is the most well-known Estonian hip-hop artist. And our sample encompasses 313 rhyming units from 689 verses. And as you can see, there are so much more variety than in literary poetry. We can see how the popular song lyrics introduces many new rhyming possibilities. And also what is remarkable that in their own particular way, the Estonian hip-hop poets are not in conflict with the rules of pure rhyme advocated by Ain Kaalep in the late 1950s, because Kaalep considered rhyming violating the requirement of the same duration in rhymes to be flawed, and his main argument against them was that the similarity in spelling doesn't excuse rhymes of different durations. I quote, because rhyme has to, in all cases, transmit something to the listener's ear, end quote. In rap poetry, one often encounters the tendency that in order to achieve a flawless rhyme, in Kaalep's sense, with two rhyme partners of the same duration, the pronunciation of the natural language is altered. For example, as you can see in this verse, the short and unstressed non-initial syllables in the word vajagi has been modified and it is pronounced as a syllable of the third duration to function as a rhyme partner to the word saagi, vajagi, and also kartagi. Kartagi is pronounced kartagi in this song, saagi, kartagi. It is characteristic as well that the rhyme partners are closely adjacent to each other, and that is the most common rhyme scheme in rap, coupled rhymes. And in this aspect, they are similar, for instance, for Finnish freestyle rap. As regards the structure of rhymes, here a fundamentally different aesthetic of rhyme in comparison with literary poetry cannot be observed. I will show this slide again. While even the most experimental literary poets have a preponderance of whole rhyme, for example, aega, such rhyme makes only up to 20% of Genka's rhymes. As I remember, the most modernist literary poets used around 70% of full rhyme, but Genka's poem, rap poetry, is only 20%. With preference to near rhymes, especially widespread deviations in syllabic consonants, around 22%, which contain both vocational deviations, for example, ulunud, ulund, unund, as well as assonance rhymes found in the rhyme innovations in 1920s, such as architectic, anorectic. It is also notable that the song Värsiarhitektuur, the verse architecture, draws attention to the assonance rhyme in metapoetic level. Familia fucking dreaming, kaifige me assonantsi. Fucking familiar rhymes enjoy our assonance. However, there are also differences between the vowels and duration of stressed syllables, for example, hommik, ummik, and unstressed syllables. In this case, the rhymes are often pronounced as of the same duration. For example, piitsin, piitsi. While for the most part literary poetry has avoided identical rhyme, rap poetry uses it comparatively frequently, around 7% of the entire sample. Of the sample lines, 28% don't have any rhyme, that is, they are open rhymes. This is, however, usually compensated with the internal rhyme. Ole usinad, et tööle panna masinad. Usinad, masinad is the internal rhyme. Also sometimes some other devices of instrumentation, for example, alliteration, familiar fucking riimid, or keevitab keeli, and so on. For the other artist, we chose Metsakutsu, who started his activity as a musician in 2000, and his sample encompasses 248 rhyming units from 628 verses, and the results of the analysis are on the board. You can see that Metsakutsu's rhyming technique further deepens the same trends that we observed in Genka's texts. And the proportion of full rhyme has diminished even more, only around 9%. And the absolutely dominant type of rhyme is the one with the difference between the rhyme partners with syllable and consonants, around 40%, for example, imelik, piletit, kõrgem, võlgne, and so on. And this results in the prevalence of assonance rhyme. As with Genka, Metsakutsu's rhyme is characterized with the abundance and diversity of devices. End rhymes may also appear as combined chains, in which different deviations from full rhyme are found. Additionally, the end rhyme is enriched with internal rhyme, and other devices of instrumentation. In this oral poem, you can see at first 3 different kinds of assonance rhymes. In the first one, only the vowels coincide with each other, X and ketti. In the second couplet, also some consonants are the same, vastas, kasvas, and in the third one we can see quite interesting compound rhyme of which the first part consists of even 3 words, siis nii seda, liidrid tega. A rather frequent type of rhyme is the so-called cross rhyme, more than 14%, where line and half-line endings rhyme with each other. You can see murdusid, ulgusid, tulgusid. And computers. Our data show that when we compare the existing rhyming canons, the richest rhyming repertoire can be seen in the rap poetry of the 21st century. The analysis of the texts by 2 rap poets, Genka and Metsagutu, allowed us to identify the drastic decrease of full rhyme as compared to literary poetry. The prevailing rhyme type in their poetry is the rhyme with the difference in the syllable and consonants. There are also quite abundant cases of cross rhyme as well as many other types of mere rhyme. We observed that in literary poetry, the Estonian rhyme culture has developed as a result of trying to find ways to fit the poetic requirements to the linguistic reality, as well as from a clash of different aesthetic orientations and preferences. There are both convinced supporters of full rhyme and those to whom the mechanic jingling of full rhyme appears to be worn out and old school. The latter authors see mere rhyme as some kind of escape from the sound inertia of traditional rhyme. However, such a perception has evolved even further in rap poetry. Already in literary poetry, changes in rhyme practice relate to resistance to automatization, or so to say, worn-out rhymes, and there have been various strategies to renew rhymes and expand the rhyming possibilities. A notable factor in creating new approaches has been the counter-reactive creation with regard to some earlier standard of prescription. But rap poetry doesn't have these tendencies, so you cannot speak of direct opposition to earlier Estonian canons, but rather an adherence to Western models on which the aesthetic of Estonian rap rhyme heavily relies. I think that's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Do we have questions? I was wondering, and this goes a little bit outside, but is this contemporary rap music affecting the contemporary literary poetry or other genres of popular music? Do you see kind of similar patterns of line kind of appearing?
I think it's starting to influence because rap poets are more often publishing their texts as poetry books, and in culture magazines they already have been identified as the proper poetry, and I think that there is quite a big influence now.
Okay, please.
Thank you. Sometimes in rap poetry, They are not only transform the words, but invent completely new words for the rhyme. Not in your examples.
No, we have in familia, but in rhymes, familia is not an Estonian.
And from this point of view, rap poetry is close to children poetry, very young children. My younger brother was a great master in his early childhood. The verses like «Сидит белочка на листике и кричит параболистики». Or one of my child, also in the early childhood Estonian example is Taks läks tööle, raks läks mööda. And what do you think about this rap poetry? It's very new and also it's a very archaic pattern there.
What do you mean by archaic?
So pre-literary.
What is important, I think, is that rap poets can't use worn-out rhymes because rhymes are something very personal. That's why they create always new words. They use different languages, proper names, because rhyme is what is defining you as a rap artist. There must be. That's why I think there is such an abundance of different types as well.
Yes. Another question, please.
I wanted to ask about the selection of the poets. Why did you choose these poets, and can you tell us whether contemporary poets also, like what kind of rhymes they have used for the last 50 years or something? What have you looked into this?
Yes, many of them, not all of them. I think Nuplu's rhymes are not the best one, but Kenka is also contemporary, but he's, I know his older generation, but maybe Osma and some other types are very creative. We chose it, I don't know, because maybe Kenka is the most influential. He doesn't.
It was also important for us that the texts are available on writing, how they divide the lines by themselves, not just written by a fan, because for us, like when we identify internal lines, it was important to see the division of lines by the artists themselves. So this was one of the constraints, that the availability of the text.
But Kenka is also a pioneer in writing in Estonian language. And what is also very funny is sometimes in written form we didn't understand, is it the rhyme or not? Then we had to listen, oh, it's a rhyme, it's a perfect rhyme, but it doesn't look like a rhyme at all.
But for example, comparing to contemporary rappers and contemporary like written poetry, rhyme, what's the, how to say, how it differs?
I think the literary poetry is very fragmented now. There are different authors, like Eda Ahi is quite a fan of full rhymes, I think. And there are some poets who prefer like rhyme hacking, like contra, very interesting rhymes. And there are, but most I think don't rhyme at all.
In Instagram poetry, there is also a lot of rhyme going on.
Thank you.
Then we have one question online. Is it possible to unmute?
Hello. Yes. Thank you. It's really interesting. I have a really small question. I know that now in Russia, rap poets use so-called double, triple, and rhymes. And rhyme when you should rhyme the first word of the line with the first word of the second line. The second word of one line to the second word of the second line, and so on for the whole line. Do you have examples of this kind of rhyming in Estonia?
Noticed because in Estonian rap poetry, the rhymes are internal rhymes are always cross rhymes. Yes, are arbitrary. They are not in some certain position. It's a very interesting idea. I have seen sonnets where the first words rhyme, but not rap.
It's from English rap, I guess. They use the model.
I also began thinking, do you have studies of kind of rhymed folk songs in Estonia? And if you do, I mean, at least in Finland, there are kind of similar patterns or styles of rhyme in rhymed folk poetry, the new one, and then the rap music, but I'm not sure if that has been studied in Estonia.
Perhaps Mari knows. Indeed, rhymed folk songs have every kind of near rhymes and definitely not all of full rhymes. It is even hard to detect if it is rhymed or not sometimes. So there are large variety of so-called rhymed folk songs.
Are there any more questions, or are we happy? Thank you so much.